Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Morning Live. I'm really excited about today's episode. Today, I get to interview an astrologer by the name of Lisa Brown. Lisa has an amazing story. I think it will be helpful for you. Those of you that knew me in my past life, meaning the past version of myself as a Christian pastor, may or may not be shocked that I'm doing an episode with an astrologer about astrology. But my hope is to dispel a lot of myths and just be able to bring in some information about how astrology can help you. I'll share a little bit about my experience with it and how I got to thinking about it. And Lisa will share her experience. So without any further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and bring Lisa on.
Hey.
There you are. Hi, Lisa.
Yeah, hey.
How are you
Thanks for
today?
having me. Good. Good.
Thank you for being willing to do this and being willing to jump in here with us. Both of us have a charismatic Christian background.
Yep.
And it's funny because, you know, I put astrology in the title, and I can just imagine, because I know I still have people that watch that, you know, can't wait to point out how I'm worshiping the devil and gone full on into the occult, although they don't understand what the occult is.
Yep.
Completely misinformed about that.
Absolutely.
So, you know, we talked a little bit before. I'm excited about doing this. I'll hopefully be able to see comments. So at some point, we'll be able to take questions maybe from the audience. But to start out, why don't you just go ahead and just share a little bit of an autobiography, just whatever you share about yourself, and let us get to know you a little bit.
So I have a super wild story. I grew up, my father was a Christian minister, and I grew up in a so-called Christian family.
Wow.
But he was a pedophile
Ugh.
and a pornographic photographer. So you can imagine going to church and, you know, seeing all of that and all the theology, but then being completely discombobulated by what's going on at home.
Yeah.
At the same time, he was, I was the highest paid child model in New Zealand during the late 80s. So,
Wow.
and then there's a lot of abuse behind closed doors with my brothers and myself and my mom and that. And so you just kind of mix all of this really bizarre, you know, circumstances with my family history. And then, you know, big custody dispute, that kind of thing. I ended up being kidnapped, which was really traumatizing as a 10-year-old out of the country to Australia. Yeah. So, and left my brothers behind, didn't get to say goodbye to them. So just trauma after trauma after trauma, right? And we immediately started going to this little church. And then we had this American woman come and stay with us for a little while because of some friends. And she said, have you ever heard of this church called Hills Christian Life Center? This is Hillsong. Mm-hmm. It was not Hillsong when I started going to it. There was only 600 people. And it was called Hills Christian Life Center. And so, you know, at this time I was about 11 years old and I started going to Hillsong. By the time I was 15, how I even began to sing with them was totally random. I was in the choir, but just kind of hiding in the choir, so to speak. Didn't really want anybody to know, you know, that I even really sung that much. And I was walking by the music minister. His name was Jeff Bullock. I was walking by Jeff's office one day and he said, Lisa, you sing. Now I'm 15 years old, right? And so I'm like, yeah. He's like, come in here. I just wrote a song. I need to hear a female sing it. Now he had never heard me sing. So I was like, oh gosh, here we go. Okay. So I said, well, I'll learn it, but you can't look at me when I sing it. You're right. I'm just 15. I'm deer caught in headlights.
Oh yeah.
And by that Sunday I was on stage at Hillsong. And from then on out, I ended up singing. I was with Hillsong for 12 years. I sang with them, I want to say it was like 8 to 9 years as one of their worship leaders. So, you know, you can go back and look at the old videos, and anybody who's a Christian that knows Hillsong, you can see Darlene Check. I was always like the brunette that was right behind Darlene Check as one of her backing vocalists. So, yeah, did that. And then was at Hillsong, one of our Hillsong conferences in the year 2000, and Phil Driscoll was one of the guest singers, musicians, and his sound engineer at the time. We met and we got married.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like a whirlwind kind of a thing over the course of about 10 months. And so I ended up moving to Georgia, and I've been here now for 24 years.
Wow.
So during that 24 years is when my deconstruction out of Christianity started. And it was, a real, like this kind of a journey. It was not a straight line at all. So
Lisa, you're taking me back because, of course, I was, we were doing Hillsong's songs in the church that I pastored, but even before that, I was a huge Phil Driscoll.
Okay, yeah.
So I listened to him a lot. So you're like really taking me back.
Yeah. It was an interesting time. Phil actually wanted my ex-husband to stay on, but we resigned because he wanted me to travel with him and do some singing, and Eric stay as the sound engineer. But when we started that deconstruction process, we just couldn't do it. Joel Osteen's church wanted to employ us because it was going to be the Phil Driscoll sound engineer and Lisa Brown, the singer from Hillsong. Jensen Franklin's church wanted to employ us. The Christian television station in Nashville, they wanted us to go up there and interview with them. But we just couldn't do it because we just started on the brink of this deconstruction process, and we already knew that it would rub up against the change that we were going through.
Now, what year would that have been when you started the deconstruction process? Roughly
2001.
Wow. Okay, so you're ahead of a lot of us.
Yeah, and it wasn't like a full-on deconstruction out of Christianity. It started out with just kind of reorienting our view of God and the Bible in general. And then hell was the next thing, kind of doing away with hell, finding out the roots of where that came from. Right. And then we ended up getting divorced, and I kind of put my deconstruction process on hold because I just kind of needed to regroup from all of that. And, we've got 2 small kids. And then I would say in 2018 or 19, I kind of got connected with a gentleman by the name of Keith Giles. And I really love Keith's books for anybody that is deconstructing. They're real user-friendly, easy to read books, but just straight to the point. I mean, he really just breaks it down, and he's got a whole series of books basically just addressing each topic. One about hell, one about Jesus, one about the Bible. So that's kind of who I recommend in terms of that.
Yeah, Facebook friends with Keith. So.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
And I joined his Square One. So I kind of picked all that back up again, the deconstruction. And that's when I really kind of started shredding it out of my life, to be honest with you, during those years. So, right. Yeah.
And you're incredibly knowledgeable about astrology. You did a reading for me around my birthday. And anytime I have had readings or anything involving someone who actually knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I'll qualify that in a second.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind. So I'm curious how you got into astrology.
Okay. So I'd always been really curious about it, even as a kid, even though I was hearing from the church that it was evil, but I didn't really know why. And now I actually come to see that they really don't know why it's evil either, why they think that, right? It's just being passed down. So then unfortunately, it was quite contentious, my divorce. And, it just is what it is. He was alienating my kids from me with his then wife. And so I was just kind of in survival mode for years and years and years. Therapist told me in 2018, your kids are going to be physically alienated from you. Get ready. And I was just in complete denial about it, like that they would do that, right? Because I just didn't understand the psychology behind it all.
Right.
2021, he physically alienated the kids from me. I was actually overseas on vacation, had to move out of my house. It just took me off guard. My nervous system was a wreck as it was. The grief of parental alienation is so bad that 80% of alienated parents end up taking their lives. Wow. And I was one of those. So in June of 2021, I ended up taking my life, and I died out the front of my house on the road out there after they kind of dragged my body out of the house. Anyway, they resuscitated me enough. They found me in time to where they could resuscitate me without any issues to my physical health or mental, doing any long-term damage. So that kind of flipped my world upside down in general between the alienation and my suicide. And it set me on a different path. And I just kind of started delving headlong into all the so-called woo-woo practices. The first thing that I started to do was I learned how to meditate because I was so suicidal for 6 months post my suicide. I could barely function. I mean, took everything within me to just keep myself breathing. Anyway, I started on January 1 of 2022. I was sitting in the chair behind me right there. And on my algorithm on YouTube popped up Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton, a video that somebody had put together. So that was all about meditation and the science behind meditation. And that just started me down this road. Within 2 months, I was not suicidal anymore. I got myself the antidepressants, the anxiety medication. I was seeing my therapist still. Next thing to come was, I've always kind of been interested in astrology. And for me personally, this isn't how everybody gets into it, but I'd had so many unpredictable things happen to me, things that just took me off guard overnight like that, like the kidnapping, right? I was, as a child, taken to somebody's home that I didn't know and had to stay there for a week in hiding so that my mom could get everything ready. Next thing you know, I'm thrown in the back of a car, blanket thrown over me so that I was hidden on the floor. So it's just like bam, bam, bam. Same with my divorce, the way the divorce happened. It just took me off guard. All the alienation took me off guard. Astrology, one thing about astrology is it's used as a predictive tool. And so throughout all this trauma, even though I'd spent years in therapy and all this kind of stuff, I was like, this might actually help me settle my nervous system so I can it was a coping mechanism basically to begin with. Maybe I can see what is up ahead so that I'm not continually traumatized. Of course, there was a lot of internal work that I needed to do, which I was on that path through meditation and therapy and that kind of thing. But that's kind of what I started to do. I found this big YouTube page or whatever, Astrology Hub, and there's another one, I can't think of the name of it right now, but I just started eating up learning about astrology by myself that way. And I did that for about a year. I was buying books, just reading constantly. I've now in my 3rd astrology school. I love it so much. I actually just signed up for another one in December for 2 courses through this fabulous Australian astrologer. But the funny part is even though I started out kind of wanting to use it as a safety mechanism for myself while I'm doing all this other internal healing, it actually made me understand myself. Forget the predictive, just the birth chart itself.
Yeah.
It helped me understand me. It helped me understand the circumstances that are in my life. Some of it's fate, some of it's free will. They are both meshed in together. I had one astrologer look at my chart without knowing anything, and he said, "Have your children been taken away from you violently twice?" It was in my birth chart.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I started. That's kind of what threw me into it all. So.
Yeah, amazing. I had no idea your history, your story. One of the comments from Judy Herman on here says, "You're an amazing woman, Lisa. Thank you for sharing your story." So I want to echo that. Thank you for sharing so openly. Might have to bring you back just to talk about your life's journey and all this that you've been through. So for me, of course, people on here know my story. But one of the things that I did in 2017 was decided to stop looking for the darkness. It was really a fascinating journey. Much like most people that deconstruct, it kind of comes in stages, right? And I got into what's known as Celtic Christianity. And I was reading a book that was written by a person from the Celtic Christian perspective. And he tells a story, and it impacted me so much. I get chills when I think about it. But he told a story about doing a talk at some ecumenical conference in Canada. And he was talking out of John chapter 1. And there's a little bit of mistranslation in our English Bibles. But in John chapter 1, when it's talking about in the beginning was the Word, and then it goes on and says that the Word, the Logos, was the light that gives light to every person who comes into the world. And I had been meditating on that before I had read this book, that particular passage. And he commented about how he talked about every person has light inside of them, according to the scriptures. And he talked about a native elder that stood up after that. And he said the native elder had tears in his eyes. And he said, "I wonder where we would be today as a people. I wonder where my people would be. I wonder where the entire Western world would be if the conquistadors who had come over had been looking for the light inside of us rather than the darkness.
Yeah.
And that just wrecked me, because I thought I have spent my entire life looking for the darkness in all of these various different topics, astrology, tarot, the New Age movement, the occult, all these different things. Oh, it's just dark, it's evil, it's demonic, all of this stuff. And I made a decision that I was going to explore these things by looking for the light rather than looking for the darkness. And I even said to myself, if I get a demon from this stuff, because it was all demonic, you open the door to a demonic thing, thing. And I thought, well, if I do get a demon from this, I know enough people that can cast it out of me.
That's great.
So I'll just call one of them, and I'll repent, I'll do the thing, I'll do what I have to do to get free from it. And so one of the things that I did was I went to a holistic fair, New Age fair, whatever people want to call it, metaphysical fair. And there was an astrologer there, and all I did was give her my, name, birth date, time, as far as I could guess. I couldn't really remember what time I was born, but I was trying to remember back from the stories. Yeah. And she printed my birth chart, and I was amazed. And having come out, you'll probably appreciate this, having come out myself from the prophetic movement and having had thousands of prophetic words from, the person who just got saved in my church to the who's who in the prophetic movement. And nobody was able to read my mail, as we used to say, as well as this astrologer. I was completely blown away.
Yeah.
And then I've had it, obviously done a couple of times since then. But I think it would be beneficial to discuss, and you can share your story. How were you able to go from, oh, this is all evil, and you shared a little bit of it. Let me reframe the question. Let me say it this way. What would you say to people who are maybe still Christians or trying to follow the Bible, but have an interest in astrology? Because I think we all intuitively know there's something to it. What would you say to that person?
There's such a misconception around astrology, and where this started. I can actually I can tell you more about the history of astrology and Christianity, but I'll tell you where the break was, because I think that this has permeated through, really about 100 years or so into main Western Christianity. And that is St. Augustine, but John Calvin was really the one to push against astrology. And this is why I'm going to read this line here. Because in his mind, like, predictive astrology is anticipating the will of God, whereas they wanted you to just obey the will of God. They didn't want you to. That's how they were seeing it. So they viewed that as evil, because you're anticipating the will of God. Well, there's nothing evil about astrology. It's funny, because I have a lot of the people I do readings for are deconstructing Christians, and by the end of it, they're like, there's nothing evil about this. I actually understand myself better and the traumas that I've been through. Yes, predictive astrology can tell you things coming up. I've had things that have happened this past year that I knew were going to happen. Did I know the circumstances in which they were going to play out? No, right? We're all individuals. I don't know what's going on in this person's life or that person's life internally, but I can still look at a chart and say, this is what you're probably going to face this year. I mean, there's some real definite things that you're going to face. I know another thing that I'm going to face this year. It's actually super beneficial to know what is potentially coming up for you, because if it's going to be, like, we'll use a relationship. If somebody's single and you know that you've got this amazing relationship energy that's going to be really strong, somebody's going to come along. Well, if you've been really hurt from past relationships, you can actually do some internal work, because if this is going to happen, I want to be in the best place I possibly can be emotionally to enter this relationship, right? Or a job. I know my job's going to change like in 18 months. Okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to get in order, to help facilitate that, so I'm not just going to be taken off guard? Or do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's nothing evil in that. So, and the planets, when it comes down to it, and the energy and the mythology, all of it's in the Bible. I mean, so much of it is in the Bible.
Yeah.
The wise men were Parisian astrologers. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
The interesting thing to me about the Magi, the wise men, is that no one, in Israel had a clue about the Messiah or the Messiah being born. But the Magi knew from the stars, right? And I always found it interesting too that from a Christian perspective, in the book of Daniel, Daniel was appointed as chief among basically the chief occultist in Babylon at the time. But he's also, again, from a Christian point of view, the only person who gives any kind of time frame about the date of Messiah's birth.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's interesting to think about that it was Magi from that part of the world who went and worshiped Jesus. So I brought with me for people that are interested in this, because there is so much astrological stuff in the Bible, but if you don't know anything about astrology, you're not going to be able to identify the various different aspects of the Bible that talk about it. So, for example, Ezekiel's vision, where he sees the living creatures with the four faces, represented the four cardinal constellations in the ancient world, with the eagle being what became Scorpio.
Yep.
And so there's just so much. So I brought to people this just to give you an idea. I don't know how well. See if I
can you read it? Can you read the title?
Yeah. But I want people to see how thick this is.
Yeah.
Big this is. But it's called Star Myths of the World and How to Interpret Them, Volume 3. And this volume is Myths of the Bible. And so it's about.
Who's it by?
His name is David
Warner Matheson. Okay, David Warner Matheson is married to my mentor.
Oh my goodness!
I thought that's whose book that was, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've actually talked about doing maybe a little bit together for deconstructed Christians. Actually, Ksenia Moore is my mentor. I'm in her school as well. I love her. I've had readings from her as well. She too is a deconstructed Christian who went through a divorce, which was not divorce is hard no matter what, but it was amicable. But coming through that divorce, it started her deconstruction, and she is now a full-time astrologer. She's fabulous. And even their story, how Ksenia had an astrology reading by an astrologer, a Serbian astrologer who's now has passed away. And this gentleman was so incredibly accurate. I've never seen anything like it in my life. I mean, it's like what I aspire to be.
Right.
And he told her exactly, without, he didn't know the guy, but his detailed description of who this person would be, his life circumstances. And in her school, she's got a video about how they ended up together, and it is bang on the mark. And I mean, because she's like us, she still is interested in mythology and Christianity to a degree, just, the how it's put together and how astrology fits into it all. So yeah, that's so interesting that's his book.
That is fascinating. That's cool. It's funny that I grabbed it and brought it.
And he has a great YouTube channel, David Warner Matheson. Yep. You
awesome.
can go on his, and so does Ksenia. So
that is awesome. So one of the things I got into early on was the tarot cards.
Yep.
And I began to realize pretty early that tarot is a language in and of its own.
Yeah.
And some people who are, at fairs doing psychic readings with tarot cards, I would say they're like tour guides, in that they're still kind of just referencing whatever the little book was that came with it. And if you think about tarot as a language, and then you think about someone, checking their book to see what this card means, it's not that much different than somebody being in a foreign country and having to get, back in the old days, we have translators on our phone now, but having to, get the book out and translate.
Yeah.
Versus being fluent in the language. And I realized pretty early that astrology was the same way, that it's like learning a foreign language. And there's a difference between sort of what is out there that people think they know about astrology,
Mm-hmm.
someone who's very fluent in the language of astrology. And so if we can think about it as a language in and of its own,
Mm-hmm.
the language of the stars, what do you think is the biggest misconception that people have in pop culture about astrology?
Uh, there's a few. I don't know that I could actually come up with one big misconception. Obviously, in the Christian world, it's that it's evil, right?
Right.
In pop culture, I think just that if you just learn X, Y, Z, you're good. You can start doing readings, or that it's just predictive. Astrology is the predictive aspect of astrology is this big.
Mm,
Astrology is massive. It can really help reveal uh, why you've kind of gone through the traumas that you've gone through, but it also helps you, it can really help you become a better person. And I'll give you an example. It's something that you said. Um, you said about wanting to find the darkness in all of this stuff, right?
mm,
And then you
right.
heard that quote and it really just lit everything up for you. So I did a reading for a girl. Actually, it was in a group setting. There was about 6 or 7 people there, and each person was just kind of offering to do whatever it was that they were gifted in. Some it was yoga, some, whatever. And they said, would you mind doing like little 10-minute quick astrology readings? That's it's hard for me because I'm a talker. So, I tried to make it maybe like 15 or 20
I can
minutes.
relate to that.
Yeah. And it's my birth chart. I'm a Gemini sun, moon, and Mercury, and a Virgo rising. Virgo is ruled by Mercury. So I'm like chatterbox. This girl was, just had come from just a horrible situation. And when she was there with our group, she said, I really think that I'm called to be a dark healer. And I was
Mm,
like, let me look at your chart. There's got to be some Scorpio going on here, right? That was my first thought.
yeah,
But
sure.
just because of the words coming out and even her energy that she was bringing, I opened it and it was what we call a stellium. So it's a group of planets all in one sign. So she's got all these Scorpio planets. That right there was just kind of typical lower vibrating Scorpio energy. So I'm telling her, I'm like, you're not called to be a dark healer. The beautiful energy around Scorpio is it is the phoenix that rises from the ashes. Everything gets burned down. Scorpio rules, excuse my language if anybody's offended by this, but Scorpio literally rules shit. It rules toilets. It rules vampires. But the upside of Scorpio is it rules transformation. It rules the rising from, it rules compost. What do you do with compost?
Mm,
You put it on your garden to fertilize it.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So it's got this, and I told her, I said, no, your energy is to move into the light, into transformation. It's interesting. I just saw her a couple of weekends ago for the first time since that. Her whole countenance and her whole being has
Wow.
changed because she took what she heard that day, has done all this internal work and had all these experiences. It's like a completely different person. She
Yeah.
needed hope. She needed to be pulled out of the darkness and told, you've actually got a really beautiful chart, even though it's been hard. I see that it's been hard,
Mhm,
but it's just the lower vibration that she's been manifesting
mhm.
versus, the beauty of Scorpio energy.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I love that you shared that because it does illustrate the transformative power. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking about the old Delphi oracle and maxim, know thyself.
Mm-hmm.
And there's probably, and having been, for me to say this, because my other area of study that I've devoted my life to has been psychology, mental health counseling. I'm a mental health counselor, all that stuff. And I think one of the best ways for someone to get to really know and understand themselves in their lives is through a natal chart. So, but I'm going to throw out a couple things that I would perceive as being sort of the general population view and idea of what astrology is, and then get your response on it. And the first thing that comes to mind for me is that people only know about sun signs.
Yeah.
And I remember being a kid back when we still had newspapers, and there was always a horoscope in
Sun
the
sign
newspaper,
astrology.
right?
Yep.
That just went with the sun sign. And so I'll hear people say, well, I'm a Capricorn, but when I read the stuff about Capricorn, it just doesn't seem to fit me. Or I'm a Virgo, but I have a lot of stuff that does not jive with Virgo descriptions that you pick up in books or whatever. So help us understand, what are we? What is our sign? What is that?
So you're really the whole chart, right? I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if I can share on the screen.
Sorry, Lisa, I didn't mean to cut you off, but when you say the whole chart, what do you mean by that? Because I don't even know if people, I mean, I'm getting really basic here. I don't even know if people understand that that's just one of the planets, even though the sun isn't really a planet, that affects or impacts us from our birth chart. So can you explain just a little bit about how the planets impact us and how it? Okay.
Yep. So I really should have organized it with you. I don't think you can see. I think my light is too.
Yeah.
I don't think I can do it. Sorry, guys. Anyway, I can post a little chart down in the comments section so people can kind of. I'll post today's chart. Actually, I'll do one for today. So in your chart, there's 12 sections. We call them houses, but just think of like a pizza, right? And 12 slices of pizza. Right. And you've got your rising sign, and then the rising sign is the sign that was on the horizon when you were born. So I'm a Virgo rising, which made so much sense because I knew I was a Gemini sun. But when I read the Gemini stuff, even as, a teenager, I was like, yeah, but there's so much of that doesn't resonate with me. Well, it turns out because I'm a Virgo rising, because when I read all the Virgo stuff, I was like, oh, this makes so much more sense. But then you've got all the other planets. So you've got like the moon. Mm-hmm. The moon is your desires. It is a part of your physical body. The moon represents your mother. You've got Mercury. Mercury is the way you talk and the way you think and you speak. It's not necessarily your intelligence, but it is, so you might have, like me, I have a Gemini Mercury. So I am all about information. I eat information up constantly. Mm-hmm. A lot of people that have a Gemini stellium, like myself, are ADHD. Gemini and Virgo are known as some of the most intelligent signs, right? You might have a Pisces Venus. Venus is the planet of love and money. It represents women in somebody's chart. So, if you're a guy and you have a Pisces Venus, it actually might mean that you disappear in love, because Pisces is very much known for going MIA. So, then there is Jupiter. Jupiter is the guru. Jupiter is our intelligence. It's our wisdom. Jupiter also shows up in our chart of when we actually might have somebody we consider a guru come into our life, right? There's Saturn. Saturn gets a really bad rap in astrology. Saturn is kind of a planet of coldness. It brings separation. Wherever Saturn is in your chart is where you're going to go through really, really hard times. Even if you're vibrating high, this is still the area that you're going to be challenged with. But here's the beauty of Saturn's energy. Saturn is the great rewarder. If you take that and really try and do the internal work to vibrate it. That word's so, catchy these days, vibrate high, but it just is what it is. If you take that energy and you're really trying to work with it internally, Saturn is the one that's going to give you the greatest rewards in that area. But you've got to put the work in. I'll give you an example. Where Saturn and Mars sit in my chart, they represent the houses of domestic violence. Mars in my chart rules that house. It's secrecy. It is things that are kind of done behind your back. That's one area. Saturn rules the area of my children, and it's in the 12th house of suffering. Those two planets sit together in my chart in the 12th house of suffering. The 12th house is also living overseas. I'm an Australian, or a New Zealander Australian, living in America, and my children have violently been taken away from me twice and sitting in the 12th house of suffering. But I always keep in mind, Saturn is going to give the most rewards. If I put the effort in and learn what Saturn means and how it applies to my life, I'm already seeing those rewards pay off with my daughter. It is unbelievable. The turnaround, right? And the turnaround was in her chart. Her moving back in with me. I knew that was coming up. I didn't know how it was going to play out because she's got her own internal working. So I say your chart, you are the external circumstances of your chart, but you're also the internal. Saturn, the internal part of me for Saturn in the 12th house is take up meditation. The 12th house rules meditation. I can really do a lot of healing work through meditation on those energies. So yeah, that's kind of a quick
Yeah,
snapshot.
thanks. Thanks for that. So that kind of leads into the next part of this that I wanted to get into, and that is natal charts or birth charts. Um, can you explain what that is and how, like, so if somebody knows nothing about astrology, but their interest is piqued and they want to meet with you and get a reading,
Yeah.
um, what is that process? What is that meeting going to look like for them?
So it's super interactive. It's confidential as well. So I basically, get your time of birth is imperative. I cannot I can tell you a little bit about your personality, but I can't help you with anything if I don't have your time of birth, because it will misplace all the placements of the houses and the planets. So that's really imperative. Time of birth, place of birth, and where you're currently living as well. And then I kind of look at the chart and I go around each section and I explain to you the energies of each section in your chart and what it represents for you. And then you add the planets. So the way I like to look at this circle with all this activity going on is the houses are the areas of your life. The zodiac signs, like if it's Sagittarius in the second house, is the sort of like the clothing, and the planet is the personality. The zodiac is the clothing that you're wearing, right?
I like
And
that.
so you're kind of playing this out on this stage of your birth chart. And so I can look at a chart. For example, I had one woman and I started the reading, and the first thing I said to her was, "What was your mother hiding from you?" And she was like, "Whoa, that's in there, right?" So yeah, you can go through a natal chart. It really helps people. It takes a lot of judgment and self-deprecation off of people, because they're like, "Oh, this makes so much sense. Now I understand why I've gone through this," So yeah.
Yeah. So the houses,
Yes.
when you're talking about houses, and this is why the time is so important. And just to talk a little bit about our session that we did, I took, the time off of my birth certificate. Of course, I was born in the 70s, so who knows, it's like
Yeah.
whenever they looked at their watch,
Yeah.
tried
Pretty
to,
much.
but, and I don't know if I'm using the correct term, so feel free to correct me, because I understand I'm a tourist with the book.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
But my rising sign was on the cusp. It was like at 0 degrees or something. And there's a term for it. I forget the term, but if someone doesn't know their exact time of birth, there's a method that you can use as an astrologer to help determine their rising sign, correct?
Yes, which I do not do, but if anybody wants to know their birth time, they can reach out to me and I can send them to an astrologer. It's a rectification of a chart.
Rectification, yeah. I was going to, reconciliation's what was in my head, but I knew
Yeah.
that wasn't it. See, I'm a tourist.
Okay.
It just reminded me of a funny story that I won't even tell, but when I was in Kenya, about the difference in language about bathroom.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, we have some of those, even the Australian culture and the American culture. Some of the words I said over here one time, in fact, I won't tell you what word it was because it'll make people fall over. But I said something to my ex-husband at the time. We were married, and I was like, "Man, that's really," and I said the word, and he was like, "You can't say that over here. Like, people will look at you like, did that just, because the meanings are different." So yeah, I had to learn pretty quick.
But what amazed me was when you began to look at my chart and say, well, let's just make sure that this is the right sign for you. You were able, I mean, the thing that really blew me away was you were able to identify exactly when I made the decision to go back to college.
Yeah.
Like down to the month.
Yeah.
And the thing that was crazy about that was I had considered it for a year. And what had happened, I think you'll appreciate this. I went to my apostolic overseers and said, I think this is what God is saying to me. I think I need to go back and get degrees in psychology. And that was like, no way, this is not God. There's no way you could have heard this. And so being the good little soldier that I was like, well, okay, I didn't hear from God. The problem was that I kept dreaming that I was back in college, like almost
Oh,
tormented
wow.
by dreams that I needed to do this thing. And so when I finally signed up and got into college was the month that you identified in my chart. And so I walked away from that. This may be something we get into a little bit later, but I really want to give people a picture and an idea of how accurate this stuff can be.
Yeah.
But I walked away from that and I thought I was doing that on my own free will. What was so mind blowing was that it took a year of me dreaming about it to finally say, okay, this is, back then, this is God. This is the way the Lord is leading me. Forget what you guys are saying. I'm gonna go ahead and do it anyway. And yet it was in my birth chart from the very beginning, which
it's crazy.
Brings up a ton of stuff, right?
See, that's not anticipating the will of God, and they're scared because you just need to be obeying the will of God. Well, who's interpreting the will of God here?
Right.
A preacher?
Really good point. Totally.
So actually, you're gonna do a better job at, if you want to throw God into all of this, you're actually going to do a better job at obeying the will of God by following your astrology, because it's what it is. It's cycles, So if you're beating your head against something because, you really want to do it, you really want to do it, you really want to do it, but for some reason you keep hitting a brick wall. Well, you're hitting a brick wall because the time is not now, but I'm telling you, the time's going to come in 3 years' time, for example. And then it'll feel like all the doors are opening. People think that, oh my gosh, I got all this money. All of a sudden it just came out of the blue. Actually, you probably had a lot of 8th house transits going on. The 8th house is receiving money, not to do with your job. It's like receiving money out of the blue.
Yeah. So can you walk us through, and you don't have to do there's 12 houses, correct?
12 houses. Yep.
So you don't have to do all 12, but can you explain what a house is for people?
Explain, like, the individual house?
What is so again, I'm approaching this from the perspective of people that know absolutely nothing about astrology. And so again, also with a presupposition that it's a foreign language to people. So when you say, this house is being impacted by this planetary energy or whatever, just really just very basically explain what a house is and how it affects it and what does it mean and so what, kind of.
I'm probably going to do a bad job of this, just
I doubt it.
I have my my notes on all of that in front of me, but I'll just do kind of like a real quick one. So so the first house is where the horizon, the sign that was on the horizon. So for me, it was Virgo. So you've got Virgo energy. The first house rules your physical body. That's a big part of it. You're actually more your first house sign than you are your sun sign.
Right. So you're just to interject. So what you're saying is that you're more your rising sign?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. You might hear it as the ascendant. That's another term. But your rising sign in astrology, kind of like pop astrology, the sun, moon, and rising are like your big three. That's what people call them, right? Your big three, but it's really good just to learn all of them. So it's your first house, the first section of your chart. And that is also where a lot of new beginnings show up for you. Or if you've got a planet going through there, say it's a derogatory planet, for example, or one that just has, lower vibration kind of energy associated with it, it could indicate physical illness is on the horizon, right? So what is that telling me? I need to really up my game on taking care of my body. It's the house of new beginnings. The second house is the house of the money that you make in your career. It's the house of food. So a lot of people that have Taurus in the second house, for example, end up being chefs because it's the house that is linked to their career, the money that they make. And if they love, being a chef or whatever, it could be in one of the career houses. That's usually kind of indicative of that. It's the house of your possessions, the things that you like to own. The third house is kind of like the junk drawer, so to speak. It is siblings, aunts and uncles, extended family members. It is your local community. It's the house of communication, the way you speak. And it rules cars and kind of local transportation. The fourth house is the home of the mother. Now, there's a little bit of a dispute as well. I'll say maybe dispute isn't a good way to put it, but the Vedics Vedic astrology, which I'm in both Vedic and I'm in Western. And when I practice, I combine the two of them together because they actually do complement each other. The Vedics believe that it's just the house of the mother, whereas in modern astrology, they term it as the house of the parents in general.
Okay.
I do see it more as the mother. Just in my practice, I've seen that more. It's the house of your property, the home that you own or land that you own. The fifth house is the house of joy. It's the house of children. It's the house of your childhood self. It's the house of creativity and hobbies, things that you really love to do. It's the house of dating. It's the house of like romance and sex, just like fun sex, right? That's what I always tell people in readings. This isn't like the, Kama Sutra type stuff. This is just we're dating and we're having sex type thing. The sixth house is the house. It's a really hard house in astrology. The sixth house is the house of enemies, lawsuits, like going to court. It's the house of servitude. A long time ago, it was the house of slavery. In modern astrology, it's been sort of more interpreted as in servitude to others. What is your service to others? It's the house of health and sickness, more just things that you can overcome versus, terminal illness that kind of sits more in the eighth house. The seventh house is the house of business contracts. It's the house of marriage, long-term partnership, any type of relationship to where you're getting into a contract. A couple that buys a house, then they're not married, that's still a seventh house topic, right?
Yeah.
Contract with a bank. The seventh, and it is the outcome of a court case, the seventh house. The sixth house is going to court. The seventh house is the outcome. The eighth house is the house of death, both literal and metaphorical. It is, the rising from the ashes. It's where you do your deepest transformation. It is the house of the occult. Any of those type of practices, that's eighth house. It's the house of taxes, divorce. There's just a lot to the eighth house. It's the house of other people's money. It's the house of your spouse's money that they make. So there might be an eighth house transit going on, and you can be like, okay, this might affect my spouse and their money. The ninth house is a beautiful house in astrology. It's the house of being around international people, not living overseas, but just being around international people. It's the house of the gods. It's the house of where religion sits. It's the house of lawyers, attorneys, judges. Higher education is the ninth house, going back to university, and long distance travel. 10th house is the house of your public reputation and your career. My chart sits mostly in the northern end of my chart, in the 10th, 11th, and 12th house, meaning I'm a very public person. And I'm a chatterbox, and I'm open to anybody. I don't try to hide anything. I'm not reclusive or a hermit. I'm very much out there. And my life literally portrays that. All of my planets sit in all of those houses. So the 11th house is the house of hopes and dreams and wishes. It's the house of the collective. If you go to a rock concert, it could be that the moon is sitting in there that night because your desire is to be at a rock concert with thousands of people. The house of the collective, right? Is like where retreats happen and that kind of thing. And then the 12th house is the house of suffering, but it is also, that's kind of like the low side of it. It's the house of your subconscious mind. It's interesting because when you do an astrology reading, if they're really wanting to sort through some traumas and stuff like that, you kind of look to the 12th house because it's very much a house of suffering through the subconscious mind. You can even look at the planets in there or the zodiac sign that's on it and get a flavor for how they're feeling internally and what maybe they've been going through. It's the house that rules hospitals, prisons, kind of government type institutions. It rules ashrams. It rules bed pleasures. Going to a day spa, so, each house has its separate topics or, there's usually a bunch of topics lumped in there, but you get a better picture when you're kind of looking at the planets with them in there. So, yeah.
And that's all determined by your time of birth, right? The placement of your house. Why knowing the time is so important, right?
Yes, because it will throw everything off. The ones that it affects the house placements, and it can affect the moon and obviously your rising sign.
Yeah.
The other planets are kind of fixed. They may move slightly by degrees, just ever so slightly if you don't know it. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. Fascinating stuff. So, um, this brings up something else, a couple
Yeah.
of things. Now, this gets maybe more philosophical because I'm sure I've got something that makes me want to be more of a philosopher about things
Sure.
than most people or other people, maybe. But so one of the things that I found fascinating when you did the reading for me was talking about, what lessons I was supposed to learn. For me, it was kind of a big picture type of thing.
Yeah.
I can't remember the term. Was it nodes for that? Do I
Yes.
have that
Yep.
right?
Yep. The North Node
Yeah.
and the South Node.
Yeah. And so that gave me a real big picture sense of, okay, with all this stuff, all these houses and challenges and
Yep.
stuff with my mom and dad and
Yeah.
all this stuff. This is what I took away from the reading was this is the main thing that I need to apply in all of this and learn from all of this.
Mhm.
But then there was also, if I remember correctly, there was two nodes.
Mhm.
One was here's what you came into this life with, and
Yep.
here's what the intention is for you to leave with, right?
Yep.
So that then brings up the question of reincarnation, karma, all that stuff.
Yep.
Because at least from my perspective, and again, I'm saying this very tentatively,
Mhm.
some of it doesn't work unless there is past life, karmic relationships and stuff like that. So that brings in a lot of these other aspects of whether you want to call it the occult or the New Age movement or whatever.
Mhm.
So how on a higher level in terms of what life is, because as Christians, it's kind of we're born into this world. It's a giant test to see if we're going to choose God. It's the same test for everybody. It's the same lesson for everybody. At
Yep.
the end of the day, the groups that we're from, it's a history test. What do you know about this person, Jesus, and what do you believe about what he did for you and your sins? And then you just go off into bliss and heaven and right? Which begs the question, why doesn't God just kill us or rapture us, especially if he knows we're going to backslide and you're one of those believers that thinks you're going to fix your salvation, then why don't we just check out the moment we finally make that decision to trust Jesus? So I guess the question that I'm asking to simplify it down is how has astrology affected your worldview or your cosmology, your understanding of God and life and some of those more existential, bigger picture questions?
That's a big question.
Is that okay, or did I put you on the spot too much?
No, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, how's it? It really empowered me to be my own guru.
I like that.
Stop looking for an external thing to save me and fix me.
Love that.
Because when I finally really learned, and this is before I ever got a reading. In fact, I've never had a natal reading from anybody. I've had transit readings about particular topics, but I really wanted to learn it just for myself.
Yeah.
Because I knew that I eventually wanted to practice astrology too. Once I learned my chart, it just made so much sense that it wasn't about some external being out there coming to fix me. It actually gives me a pathway to heal myself. I feel like one of the issues with religion in general, even if it's not Christianity, not that I've studied like a ton of religions, but it seems that they seem to do follow a real similar pattern. And that is this constant needing something else to come in and fix you, to come in and save you. You're always grappling outside of yourself, and it's self-abandonment. And in my opinion, self-abandonment causes mental illness.
Oh man,
I think it is
such a good way of saying that. Such a good way of saying that.
Yeah, and astrology really helps you. I mean, I cannot tell you how many people have had their charts read, and it's like a sigh of relief, like, oh gosh, here I was thinking, that I'm going through all this because of all this other stuff that I've done. No, some of this is faded. You were supposed to go through this in order to become the best version of yourself And not because some God out there is going to keep punishing you if you don't get it right, you know?
Hmm.
And our birth charts are 26,000, like the same placements won't happen again for another 26,000 years. That kind of leads me. I'm not big on telling people how to believe about anything, even when I do readings, even with the North Node and the South Node, because they are indicative. If you believe in karmic astrology or karma in general, or past lives and reincarnation, the South Node is where you ended sort of your last life. That's what you went out with. And this life you're called towards to go towards the North Node. When you think about that and you look at the 26,000 period of time that our birth chart, it lasts for, it kind of makes me think, well, it's 26,000 years of going through this, to manifest the best in this lifetime.
I love that.
Topic, but
that kind of segues into the next part. But I had a friend that met with you and had a reading done, and that was the biggest takeaway I had from my conversation with him.
mm-hmm.
After that appointment was a big sigh of relief. Like, there's not something wrong with me. And I think too, it can, and you might want to speak to this or not, just because of your own experiences that you've already shared in this interview. But for me also as a parent, that takes some of the pressure off because from the strictly physicalist, materialist worldview, I mean, okay, I'm going to be too wordy here.
Okay. I love it.
Not that you're too wordy. I just know that I can be. And then I lose my train of thought.
Yeah, me too. Oh, trust me, me too.
That's just too many trips around the sun.
That's your Virgo, by the way. That's all your Virgo energy.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, it is. That's exactly what that is.
But as a parent, it takes some of that pressure off. With scientific materialism, one of the foundational principles of physicalism that came out of the Renaissance was this idea that we are a blank slate. And this was necessary to move people out of what they believed to be superstition. I mean, people don't, I think, realize that these philosophers that formed for us this physicalist worldview very much had an agenda to undermine not just Christianity, but to undermine other spiritual systems as well. So there was a huge push that when a baby is born, they are a blank slate, and everything else that happens in their life is the result of the internalization of their experiences and their processes. So what that does for us as parents, then, this is still a presupposition now. It's like dropped out of consciousness. So people will think this way without even realizing that they've been taught to think this way, is that our kids are a blank slate when they come in. And if we don't do everything meticulously, I especially see this with millennial parents.
Oh, yeah.
We don't do everything meticulously right, we're going to fuck them up.
I mean, a birth chart proves that, I'm sorry, those kids are going to be fucked up whether we do it or not. I mean, I hate to be that way, but you're born with it, right?
Right. Now, here's just bringing in something else, like in the sort of metaphysical community, there's a lot of talk about the law of attraction, manifestation, things like this. We could certainly get into the problem of free will. Like I mentioned earlier with my going back to school, I walked away from that reading like, I thought I chose that. That was chosen for me. But I think, and I think you said this to me actually, so this is probably an idea that came from you originally to begin with, but that we cannot manifest outside of our chart. I think that's such an important component for people, because they may be trying to manifest things that either aren't in their chart at all, or like you mentioned a few minutes ago, the timing is just off. It's like it's the right idea intuitively, it's the right desire. It's just you're 3 years ahead of its, this idea is 3 years ahead of its time, and you're going to beat your head against the brick wall if you try to manifest this. And so I just think, I'm not really asking a question here, although I do want to get your thoughts on this or your response to this, but I do think that your chart can help you understand not just the timing, but okay, I'm going to be dealing with this, like you said, a job change in 18 months or something. So no matter how hard I try to manifest a promotion on that job in
Ah,
18 months, it's not going to happen. And so I guess what's interesting to me is this thought that if the soul is eternal and it did pre-exist, then there certainly was planning
mhm,
that was involved that predetermines aspects of our lives, right? And
mhm,
so that was an idea that I really struggled with. And then bringing in the astrology piece, it's like, okay, so there is not meticulous control or meticulous planning about our lives, but there are certainly parameters. There's a playing field, if you will. I'm a big American football fan. So, if you go out of bounds, you're out. If you hit somebody out of bounds, it's a penalty.
yeah.
And so for me, understanding my chart and the various different things about it, um, it provides the playing field
Mhm,
to say, these are the things, these are the lessons that I need to learn. These are the challenges that are going to help me learn those lessons.
mhm.
And this is the playing field that I have in this particular incarnation. Does that sound, am I
Yeah,
on the right
yeah,
track with that?
absolutely. Yeah. I that's what it's like a roadmap for this incarnation. I
Yeah.
I believe that anyway. So,
Yeah.
and I don't get too tied up in the past life stuff. I lean more towards, yeah, this. I don't know how. I don't know that my brain can really comprehend it. Right? We try to do our best. Where I draw the line personally, so that first year that I was learning astrology and coming out of all the suicidal ideation, all that kind of stuff, the one thing that kept coming up through various people that I had met or already knew that were into all this was saying, well, you're going through all this because of the karma in your chart. And there are astrologers that do believe that the 12th house is the house of karma. And that, well, but how it gets taken a step further is, well, you're suffering regarding your children because you must have been either a really
Uh,
good parent or you were really bad to somebody in your past
yeah.
life. So now you're paying for it with this 12th house
Yeah.
energy. I'm sorry, I don't buy that.
Yeah. I don't either. I think there's, yeah. I
I
mean,
think that humans struggle with uncertainty.
mhm.
And I think that when we suffer, we want a reason as to why we're suffering. I think astrology actually does help with that a little bit.
Mhm.
But I think where humans tend to get it wrong is they want this certainty as to why I'm suffering.
Mhm.
Like, well, it must have been that I was a bad person in this past lifetime. So now I've got to make up for it in this lifetime, and this is how it's playing out. I personally don't buy into all that.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm glad you brought that out and pointed that out, because then that's just another, for me, toxic religious system
Exactly.
of shame and
Yeah.
self-abandonment.
Yeah. Well, and that actually puts more or takes away free will, I
It
think,
does,
in this
completely.
lifetime. I mean, and then it just feels like, oh, well, we are completely being controlled by the whole
Mhm.
thing. But
Right.
that's not what astrology is about. It is both fate and free will. There are definitely things that are fated in your chart, but there's a bigger picture, a grander thing going on than just my chart. There's my kids' charts that are interplaying. This whole thing that's happened for my kids and I this past 6 months, when I look at their charts, my chart, and some other people that are involved charts, I'm like, oh my gosh, the picture, it's painted this massive picture that this was going to play out this way. So,
Yeah.
but it could have played out differently if every single person involved was doing their best at doing the inner work, doing the shadow work, really addressing things. It played out the way that it played out because of their own free will.
Yeah. So is it, I've heard this said,
Mhm.
I've heard it said that the astrological energy, I guess, for lack of a better term that I have to describe what I'm thinking, um, is sort of like the weather and planning for the weather. Would you say that's a fair analogy? I'm sure it's oversimplified.
Yeah,
But
no, I think it's great. I actually use that when talking to people how, oh, well, predictive astrology is just evil. Well, then predicting the weather is evil because it's
ah,
kind of along the same lines.
yeah,
The almanac, they use astrological, in the sky, it's all energy. We feel the rays of the sun, not when those rays begin on the sun. We feel them, however long it takes to get, what is that, thousands of years, hundreds of years, I can't remember all that kind of stuff in school, but and it's the same with the energy of the planets. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's kind of one way that I think about it, is just the energies take time. That's another thing with the predictive part. Sometimes, like I did tell a friend recently, I used December 18th, and I said, something's going to happen with your house and something is going to happen in your career. They're going to be very pivotal. And she, sure enough, by the end of the day, she was like, oh my gosh, I got this job offer and this thing that's happening with my house. I got the call from my accountant today that the process has started, right? Sometimes you're able to get real accurate with the predictions, but most of the time I will tell people it's energy. Energy is not, 12 o'clock, here it is, it's happening. You give it some energy's movement, right? It's coming towards us, like we feel the rays from the sun now, even though they started a long time ago. That's kind of like how I describe astrology and the things that may happen. So
yeah,
give it some time frame.
So I had one more question for you, but before I get into that, I want to ask you, are you okay with, like, if I open it up for questions from people that are commenting, are you okay with doing a question and answer with? I should have asked you that ahead of time.
That's okay. I actually, if it's only okay with you, if we have time, would like to explain how, because a lot of people don't realize this, that Christianity and astrology actually went hand in hand, and they will be shocked at who it came through. Can I share with that a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. Please go.
Okay. I've written notes here because I don't want to mess this up. So basically, astrology started, this is just astrology in general before we get to the Christian part. Astrology started in the Middle East. It moves to the Greeks. It gets repackaged by the Romans, and then the Arabs take a hold of it. And then it is introduced to Europe through medieval Christians. And it's scholars, actually, medieval Christian scholars. So what happened was, there was a famous Roman poet, Ovid, I think that's how you say his name, O-V-I-D. He wrote a book called Metamorphoses. I don't know if anybody has heard of it. That book influenced so much stuff. If you start to research all that particular book influenced in our history, it would blow your mind. Metamorphoses basically was about the changing of the gods, or people that came into contact with the gods. And he was a poet. So what he did is he collected Greek mythology and he repackaged it into a Roman voice, because of the time frame that this happened. The Greeks had been already absorbed into the Roman Empire. So if you were an elite during that period of time as well, you would have a Greek tutor. So in Greek sciences, Greek philosophy, Greek mythology, Greek imagery, and Greek astrology, it was all being transmitted into the Roman culture. Metamorphoses is all about Greek mythology, and it uses the planets and allegory. So then that book ended up getting Virgil, the other poet. He ended up being inspired by that book, and Virgil's writings end up influencing Dante. And we know Dante wrote Dante's Inferno, all about hell. What a lot of Christians don't know, this is the real pivotal point for astrology and Christianity right here with Dante, which I think would blow people's mind, because all they know about Dante is the Inferno. Dante wrote another thing called Paradiso. Paradiso is the 7 levels of heaven to God. You know what each of those levels are represented by?
I'm going to guess one of the 7.
And so here we go from Metamorphosis, the Roman poet that wrote Metamorphosis. You follow that writing. Dante's writing was ultimately influenced by Ovid's Metamorphosis, which is all Greek mythology. And those allegories of those planets are brought into Dante's writing. And yet, what have Christians focused on? Dante's Inferno. Pretty interesting. I mean, that's kind of wild.
Yeah, and I also think just, references to the Bible and astrology in the Bible, that's why 7 is such a sacred number.
Mhm.
Also, that comes straight out of astrology. So the 7 lampstands, I mean, the book of Revelation, right? The 7 lampstands,
Yep.
all of that stuff is based on the sun, moon, and 5 of the planets that they could observe with
Yep.
the naked eye, if I'm not mistaken. So that's
Yep.
why 7. It wasn't like God just said, "Oh, 7." It was an ancient arrangement that was
Yep.
around this really hidden knowledge. I mean, it's a shame that we've lost
Yep.
so much of that.
And hence allegory, why allegory is so important, because
Mhm.
allegory points you to the sacred, the sacred and the secret, the hidden knowledge, to uncover it. That's why allegory is so great. Hence why Metamorphoses, the book, it was all allegorical, and Dante, continued that. It just still blows my mind to this day that Christians harp on about Dante's Inferno and hell, and yet the other side of that was astrology with the 7 heavens. So that was really the first time where there was the fusion between pagan myth and astrological symbolism. And then, of course, by the time we get to John Calvin, really it was St. Augustine, but John Calvin was, the one that pushed the whole anticipating the will of God versus obeying the will of God. What's
Really
funny is they still allowed you, they were still okay with you seeing a medical astrologer.
interesting.
They just didn't want you to have predictive astrology.
Predictive astrology. Very, very interesting.
But of course, the will of God, again, I'll reference it again. Most of the time when you link this whole will of God, who is the will of God being spoken through?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. So last question, at least that I had prepared, or wanted to get your thoughts on, is this whole idea of the age of Aquarius and the precession of the equinox.
Yeah.
How do you understand the age of Aquarius? Is it a thing, or is that just sort of, again, new age tourism?
I do believe in it. Yeah. I mean, it's a good question to ask because there is a lot of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the astrology community, most people believe in it. Some kind of poo-poo it more on the Vedic side, and that's okay. I mean, yeah, I do believe in it. And I tell you what, we're coming into a Aquarian season right now for the next 20 years.
Right.
Well, we started it. We've kind of been tiptoeing around it. Hence why all the alien stuff has come up. Whether you believe that they're aliens or not, it doesn't matter. But the fact that it's even coming up that way is because we've got Pluto that has now gone into Aquarius for the next 20 years.
Yeah, Lisa, I'm going to interrupt you right there. Can you talk a little bit more about Pluto and Aquarius and what that is? And again, you can put that, you can kick that down the road. I interrupted your thought.
No, it's okay. I'm happy to. I love talking about this stuff. So I'll start by telling you a little bit about Pluto in Capricorn in order to lead into Pluto in Aquarius. So Pluto went into Capricorn in 2008. Pluto represents basically coming through and destroying something, burning it to the ground, and so that it can be rebuilt. It's the transformation energy. Pluto rules power, control, manipulation, secrets, deception, right? That's the downside of it. When it went into Capricorn in 2008, the housing market crashed. It was pretty astounding to watch it. And even when Pluto was on its way out of Capricorn over the last couple of years, we started to see the banks and the, sort of the government, the money issues sort of, play up again. So Pluto really comes through slowly to transform everything. It went through for the last 16 years in Capricorn, and you look at the power, control, and manipulation, the governments, it doesn't matter which political party you sit with, I don't care, it's got nothing to do with that. You look at the control that has really tried to tighten up in the political field, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when Pluto goes into Aquarius, Aquarius rules the collective. Aquarius is power to the people. It is communal, right? It's also like communes. It's like all the things like meditation, all those kind of things that you would do together that just kind of seem a little hippy dippy type thing. It's technology, it's airplanes, it's aliens. So then Pluto comes in, it's been dipping in and out of Aquarius, going back and forth between these two. And you see the dynamic is starting to shift. It's interesting to me, even with Trump coming into office and just all the things that are being signed. I think it may make the people really rise up here at some point and really push back hard. I mean, who knows? But Aquarius is the collective energy. It's kicking out the old Capricorn, the old dinosaurs, the old leadership, entering into a new age that is really ruled by the people. Now, do I think that that means all of a sudden, oh, power to the people? No, because usually what happens is it turns a complete and utter shit show, right?
Right.
Before, if the planet as a collective can get their act together with everybody's, would stop being so selfish on a kind of on an individual level and really start caring and loving for each other, then yes, we will get power. The downside of Aquarian energy is more drone type energy, or Seven in Star Trek. What was she, a cyborg?
I know we have
The
some
cyborgs
watching. They can put it in the comments, but I'm not one of them.
I think it's cyborg. I don't know if anybody knows. I think that's kind of one of the things in Star Trek. Aquarian energy can be very cyborg energy. It can be where we actually lose our individual selves and kind of go into this more cyborg kind of mentality. So that is, it's going to be kind of interesting to watch this whole thing play out. But it's going to, in terms of the bigger picture, you're talking about the precession of the equinox. We've been in this age of Pisces, hence Jesus, hence all this Christianity. I mean, you think of anything religion-wise, especially in Western culture. So that is on its way out. I personally don't think that we've actually started into the Aquarian age yet. I think we're in this real middle ground where it's, last sort of 100 years or so. We're going to feel like it is more there because Pluto has gone into Aquarius, and that's a slow-moving planet.
Now, what does Pluto represent? Like you talked a little bit about Jupiter earlier, Saturn.
Yeah.
What is Pluto?
Pluto is the transformation. It really comes in to transform you. And, think of it, like I said earlier, it rules compost. It runs burning things down, and compost is good. It feels painful because everything's getting burnt to the ground. We're kind of going through that right now. I feel like, it feels like the planet's on fire.
Yeah.
But I think if we are moving into this shift that you hear people talk about, then hopefully 100th monkey type scenario, that this catches on with people and we do start collectively kind of vibrating at a higher energy. This whole deconstruction from Christianity that's been going on like pretty strongly, over the last several years.
Yeah.
Is very much this moving out of the Pisces age.
Yep.
I think it's 2,500 year Pisces age into an Aquarian age. Aquarius rules science, so we're probably going to see a lot more of the scientific and really pull away from religion. Of course, a lot of us are not going to be around for that because,
right,
it's going to go on for 2,500 years. So
yeah, which and I love that you brought out it's both light and shadow, right? There's the positive aspects of it, but there's also, watch out for this.
Can I point something else too about religion and Pisces energy? We've been in this age of Pisces. I'm speaking strictly with my experience in Western Christianity. Western Christianity to me doesn't have really good boundaries. It really steps over into people's lives and tries to control it without having, I think, a whole lot of autonomy for people. That is such Piscean energy. Pisces is ruled by Neptune. Neptune is boundaryless. It feels like you can't quite get a beat on it. It's really not good with boundaries. It's also rose-colored glasses. We've been in the Pisces age, and I feel like a lot of Christians, that's what has controlled them, just having this pie in the sky. Oh, there's God in heaven, and we'll go off into the by and by. That's rose-colored glasses thinking. That's the Piscean age. So it's going to be interesting to see this play out in the Aquarian age.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Pluto moved not permanently, but for the long term into Aquarius. That was in November, wasn't it?
November, yeah. It's been touching back and forth for a couple of years, but November is when it moved in for the next 20 years.
It's just interesting to me that transition was occurring around the same time as our elections.
Absolutely.
What I'm hearing you say is, for all the progressives out there, don't give up hope. And for all the conservatives out there, all is not lost.
I'm apolitical, okay?
I'm trying to be.
Side.
Yeah, I'm trying to be, but I know there's a lot of, and I work at a university, and it's a collective nervous breakdown. I probably shouldn't say that publicly, probably get me in trouble, but I think it's pretty obvious in anybody who's connected to universities anywhere in America. There's like almost a collective nervous breakdown that's happening, and so that's why I'm sneaking that in there.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to push any political agenda at all.
Yeah, I'm not either. But I tell you what, and I really am not trying to make this personal about one
Right.
one specific political figure,
Mhm.
but it really does feel like we're burning everything down to the ground.
Yeah.
Right? Either party.
Yeah, I've been
like it's gone that way.
been saying that for years, that my sense is with the transition from Pisces to Aquarius that everything is going to change. All of our systems are going to change, and there's a gasping for breath of the old age, not just politically, but in religion, in
everything, corporations,
universities, everything. And so we're seeing this new that's trying to emerge, and the old fighting like crazy for its life. That's how I'm kind of interpreting the world.
Yeah, and I mean,
regarding this transition,
we're gonna watch this play out just over the next 20 years, regardless of the precession of the equinox in the Aquarian age. But just even Pluto being in Aquarius over the next 20 years, I guarantee you're going to see a lot more homesteads. You're going to see a lot more people wanting to band together on land for communities, grow organic food. And at the same time, you're going to have the government trying to come in and, through mainstream media, continue to poison people like, oh, that's bad. And that's, make up a whole bunch of garbage to try and get people scared. Even this airlines thing that's happening. I mean, the astrology world is buzzing on this whole airlines thing that's happening, all these plane crashes and stuff.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, because you're seeing the patterns in the cycle, but then you stand back and you look at what mainstream media is feeding you about all of it. It's interesting being an astrologer if you pay attention to all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You kind of see the power, control, manipulation all playing out, and it's playing out according to the astrology.
Of course it is. I mean, when you understand it and you've experienced it, and that's just it. Like, I feel like, again, that I've just barely dipped my toe in the water, but yet it's so apparent when you talk to people that know.
I'll give you an example, and I'm not saying this to put fear in anybody. It's more just pay attention. Every time Uranus goes into Gemini, America goes to war. Guess what is about to go into Gemini this summer?
This summer, wow.
It's going to touch into Gemini, and then it'll go back into Taurus. I think it might even touch in again, maybe one more time and go back out, and then it will go into Gemini, I believe, for about 9 or 10 years. And Uranus is a planet, it feels unstable. The energy of it in the chart, wherever it's transiting your chart, you're going to find that that's the area you've had the most instability in. I mean, instability is not necessarily a bad way. It can be, Uranus is neither good or bad. It's kind of suddenly, and it just is kind of feels like you can't get a handle. Everything just kind of feels rocky in that area. So yeah, it's just, if you look at the history of astrology, every time wars happen, and go pull up a chart for that time and you see where the planets are, okay, let me go back and look at the other war that happened. Okay, Uranus was there then as well. I mean, so
yeah.
So we talk of this war energy coming up as well. So I'm not saying that it's going to happen. I hope it doesn't, but you see the cycles.
Yeah.
Every time Pluto sextiles Neptune, aliens appear next to nuclear plants. And that's usually when nuclear stuff starts to happen. I mean, you can look at the documentaries on this. I don't think a lot of people know about that, but documentaries have been made about aliens or these beings being in nuclear plants. And when you look at the history of the astrology, it's always when Pluto sextiles Neptune. Guess what we're about to start going through? Pluto sextiling Neptune while Uranus is in Gemini. You see what I'm saying? You start to put the pieces together. You're like, oh, okay, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Very. Sorry, I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but just
no, it's really good. No, I'm glad you did, because again, my purpose in doing this is to give people a real overview of the nature of astrology and how it can be beneficial if you can anticipate some of these things that are coming up or make sense of, and also it prevents us from taking things so personally or making things personal.
Yeah.
So it may cause us to just, in some cases, be like, okay, it's, it's going to happen. It's going to go down. But I would rather know, even
Yeah.
if it's
Yeah.
bad news, I would
Prepare.
rather know and prepare.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So I was kind of looking through the comments just for questions. Claire Sherlock says, any insights into why Christians are so threatened by astrology? I think we've touched on that a little bit. It seems everything that isn't Christian is demonic. Even yoga is threatening to Christians, and I'm puzzled as to why so much insecurity and fear. I'm going to just take a swing at that real quick because I have to come at it. I have to be honest and come at it from the perspective of someone who was on the other side of that. Like I was the guy that was threatened by astrology and even yoga. I remember trying to help people understand yoga is sort of a religion. It's not just, doing exercise. Back when I was a Christian, and everything I talked about it, touched on this, everything was demonic. And I think at the end of the day, for some people, I can only speak for myself and my experience, but it boils down to misinformation that we think is accurate. And I think one of the contributing factors is there have been so many sort of high profile testimonies, if you will, of people who were satanic high priests, or they were in Freemasonry, or they were yoga or whatever. And then, like, I even heard one guy say, to become a high priest in Satanism, you have to be a 33rd degree Mason. And so people, it's this logical fallacy of appeal to authority. They must have studied it. They must know about all these different things. And look, they're telling me it was demonic. But in reality, a lot of it's just completely bogus.
It is all bogus.
But there is no way to fact check. I could start a YouTube channel, just hypothetically, right? I could create an alter ego. I could start a YouTube channel, or even stick with my own name. Start a YouTube channel and say I was a high priest of Satan, and I could tell you fantastical stories about astral projection and bringing demons down upon Christians and warfare with churches, and how I couldn't penetrate certain areas because there was such a prayer covering over that area. And the sad thing is, I'd probably get 25, 30,000 views and get invitations to come speak at various different churches, and it would all be bullshit.
Yeah, and
like nobody would have any way of verifying any of it. And I mean, by bullshit, just my story is bullshit. Like none of that's true.
There was a famous author several years ago, I want to say maybe 15 years ago, who wrote a memoir, and he was on Oprah. Like, it was, I wish I could remember the guy's name, but anyway,
it might be one of my Facebook friends, so we'll just keep names out of it.
Well, then it came out a few years later that it was all bullshit.
Yeah, I think I know who it is.
Like, where was the fact checking? You know what I mean?
Right. Correct.
And I want to share something with you on that topic. I had a guy who was a Facebook friend of mine deconstructing, and he just started to delve in tarot. And he knew that I did astrology. Well, he kind of started to get into a little bit of fear. He might be a Facebook friend of those too, I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. And so he messaged me and he said, how do you, as somebody that's come out of Christianity, how do you stop the fear? He said, yeah, I've deconstructed, but there's still this innate fear. And I said to him, well, just try using some kind of critical thinking in a real practical sense. I said, do those tarot cards in and of themselves, are they doing anything evil to you? When you're using them? Is there anything evil coming out of you? They are innate objects. They're inanimate objects. The tarot cards in and of themselves don't do anything. This here contains more evil than the tarot cards themselves.
For sure, without a doubt.
Where Christians are painted tarot is evil. Okay, but have you ever had a tarot reading? Most of them will tell you no. Have you ever had an astrology reading? No. Well, why do you think they're evil? So I said to him, I said, you know what? Just think of it as these are just tools. I mean, I could go out and make a rock evil by throwing it at somebody. The rock in and of itself is not evil.
Correct.
It's what I do with it that makes it good or evil. It's the same with astrology. It's the same with tarot. Remember the Christians went through in the 80s, is what I grew up in. Drums are of the devil. Well, when I played the drums, they're fun. I'm having
Oh
fun.
yeah.
There's nothing demonic
Yeah,
about
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Just use a little bit of critical thinking about this stuff, is what I
Yeah.
would challenge Christians to, you know.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think also, from my perspective, just speaking for myself, there is a lot of, we could get into whether it's deliberate or accidental, but there is a lot of mind control that goes on within Christianity. And it almost seems to me like someone deliberately trying to cut humanity off from this sacred knowledge that can be of benefit to us, especially empowering us as individuals.
Absolutely.
And the whole system, at least in the West, is based on, well, evangelical Christianity is spread around the world. So
Yeah.
evangelical Christianity, the whole basis of it is this existential fear that you're going to perish in hell. You brought up Dante's Inferno. You're going to perish in hell, and the way out is what you believe and what you do. And so that makes us afraid to look at anything that might challenge status quo. So
Yeah.
that's part of the answer. Here's another question from Judy Herman. She says, which of Keith Giles' books do you recommend to start with for a person just beginning their awakening from toxic theology?
That's a hard one to answer right off the top of my head. What I'll do is I will find the one that I would say start here, and I'll post it in the comments.
That sounds great. That sounds great. Holly Nelson says, Lisa was able to tell me that I would be in front of a new audience, in quotation marks there, starting a new job in January/February, and here I am.
Yeah.
And I am in a completely different role at a brand new company, and I just started a couple of weeks ago. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. Judy also asks, any insights on the alignments of the planets for the month of January this year?
Yeah, so a lot of people have actually asked me that question. The alignment, that is an astrological thing, not an astrology thing. And the reason I say that is because they're all in different signs at the time. If they were in a stellium in one sign, then yes, I would share more on it, but they're not. It's just a really cool thing happening out in the sky. So I'll tell you, if anybody wants to learn about the history of astrology, Western astrology in particular, one of my favorite astrologers, his name is Steve Judd. He is releasing, it's either a 6 or 7 part series soon, like maybe this month or next month. So yeah, you can be on the lookout for that. Steve has a YouTube channel, and he's great. So he's been doing astrology for like 50 years. So
wow, and what was the name again? I'm sorry, I'm reading comments.
Steve Judd. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's see. I'm gonna scroll down here.
Somebody asked, where would we start for studying astrology? If you're wanting to study it just to learn your own chart, again, I'm happy to post some books in the comment section. Somebody asked me this recently. I don't mind pulling up their text message real quick and seeing, because I can give the names if you would like.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
The astrology school, there's astrology schools that you can go to, and not to become an astrologer, literally just to learn. My favorite in regards to that is a lady by the name of Ksenia Moore. Her classes are, in my opinion, affordable and very practical, very quick learning. Yeah, I think she's fabulous. Okay, for just learning the basics, there's a book called Astrology, Using the Wisdom of the Stars in Your Everyday Life, and you can get it on Amazon. And then if you want to get on and calculate your birth chart online, you can go to astroseek.com and then astro.com. I prefer AstroSeek personally, but a lot of astrologers, I have software that I use, but a lot of people learn by just getting on the internet and pulling up those websites. There's also another book called The Only Astrology Book You Will Ever Need.
I've heard of that one, yeah.
I do have that one. It is good. It's by Joanna Martine Woolfolk, I think is how you say her last name. So both those you can get on Amazon. They're both pretty basic, easy to understand, but I promise you, somebody said Deborah Silverman. Yes, I've actually done Deborah Silverman's moon progression course. So
Mm.
there's so many great astrologers out there, and you can get on YouTube. Astrology Hub is a great YouTube site. The Astrology podcast is fabulous. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. So Lisa, thank you.
Welcome.
I'm looking to see if there's any other new, and I don't see all the comments, just for people out there. I have no idea how this platform works and why some comments show up and other comments don't. Let me just scroll down to the bottom and see if there's any.
It's people asking about where to get a reading.
Yeah. So I wanted to address that, but first I want to preface this before I put Lisa's email contact in the description in the link. People can reach out to you on Facebook as well. But I want to promote you just a little bit, and this is absolutely true. What I'm saying, you didn't pay me to say this ahead of time. We didn't ahead of time. But I have spent literally thousands of dollars with professional counseling, energy workers, readers, shaman. I've run the whole gambit of people. They've all been helpful. They've all been wonderful. But I will say, Lisa, I have not worked with anyone that I got more out of my money.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I got my money's worth with. And again, that's not to put anybody down. I just you go above and beyond, and you're very reasonably. You charge very reasonable prices. I want to say, Lisa explained things, answered my questions, gave me really pertinent and valuable information. And it was clear that you had spent a lot of time in preparation before you met with me. So, yeah, I just want to encourage anyone that wants to work with you, that wants to know more about this, that wants to understand things in their lives. I cannot recommend Lisa highly enough. So again, the information is in the link. I don't know, Lisa, if you want to add anything as far as how people can get a hold.
Yeah, so I'll post a comment of some of these books and stuff like that in the live stream on Facebook, and so people can just click on there and then message me. And then my email, I think you had posted in the description as well. You're more than welcome to reach out to me via my email. I did see a really great question there, if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, no, I don't mind at all. Not, yeah, of course. I want to. Judy says, "Glad you weren't one of my clients, Aaron." That I'm not trying to take anything away from people that I've worked with, because I've worked with wonderful, wonderful people. I am just trying to say that Lisa definitely hits the ball out of the park. Let's just put it that way.
Well, I use astrologers and get my own astrology readings, and I actually think astrology really complements therapy.
Yeah, it does. I agree.
Meditation. It's like another tool in your toolbox, right?
I agree.
I do want to just dispel one thing real quick about astrology. When you're getting a reading, I'm not here to tell you what to do.
Right.
If you're coming for a career reading, a relationship reading, or whatever, I am here to show you, here's what the energies are playing out. Because a lot of people will come to me needing a decision on something, a job. What do I do? That's not up to me. All I can tell you is the timing of things. I can tell you if it appears as though you're in the right direction with the type of job you're in, or, now I will say I'm not a counselor. I've been through a ton of therapy with a psychologist. And if people ask for my opinion, I'm a little bit hesitant to give my opinion. It just really depends, I think, on the situation. But I will encourage people towards different modalities and seeing a therapist for guidance and that kind of thing. So I just want to make that clear that I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just here to show you what the options are and the energies and the direction. So,
yeah.
Okay. The question was actually about free will that somebody had.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. This is from Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
Question: we as individuals decide from our own free will whether we operate in the lower or higher octave, the thing just jumped, of our astrological energy. Absolutely. And so I've watched this play out. I'm not gonna give names or anything like that. About a year ago, I was looking at somebody's chart. I didn't really know all the life circumstances that were going on inside the home, but I said to a friend of mine, I was like, if their marriage is not good, if they're not on a good foundation, this person is going to be presented with all the energies to have an affair.
Mm.
And I found out in November that this person engaged in an affair in 2024. And my comment was that in 2023, you can see all that kind of stuff. Now, how can that be? The astrology, you said that they were going to have an affair. No, you got to be careful. If they're not on good footing in their marriage and they haven't been doing the work internally for themselves and in their marriage together as a couple, that energy is going to be presented in transits that could lead them, kind of like you said, here I was, thought that I made that decision to go to school. You were being compelled by the energy.
Right.
It will compel you. If you are vibrating at the lower energy of what's going on in your chart and not doing the work, it's going to almost feel like you were compelled to have an affair. Now, the beauty of that is I've had people come to me and say, I did have an affair. Can you see it in the chart? And they ended up walking away, because we'll use affair as an example, because that is a tough one, especially when Christians have an affair or whatever, to get over the shame and all that kind of stuff, right? It actually helps them. People think, oh, people need to be beat up because they had an affair. No, they need to take accountability. And guilt can be a good thing, but shame isn't. Somebody can die in shame, right? And so what it does is it kind of helps them, oh gosh, yeah, I was not in a good place even leading up to it. This is why I felt compelled. The planets didn't make them do anything. It's the fact that they hadn't been putting in the work and really protecting, you know what I'm saying? I hope that kind of answers the question, Michelle. Like the girl with the light and dark energy, her telling me she felt like she was going to be a dark healer. That was from her trauma. And in fact, she's got all this heavy Scorpio energy. She needs to see the higher vibration of scorpionic energy, that she can choose that. So it is free will.
I will say too, from the reading you did with me, and I have to be careful because this information is going out publicly. But let's just say that there was a house that you were able to identify where there would be some challenges that I'm going through currently. And it involves other people. That's why I don't want to speak publicly about it. But just generally, having that information was so valuable without all of the nuances, or again, like I said, meticulous detail of prediction or control, to know, okay, I'm just going through some tough astrological weather in this area. And what that did was that has prevented me from taking any of it personally.
Yeah.
And understand that people are just reacting to me based on the energy that's around me.
Around you and out of their own birth chart.
Yeah.
I actually had that conversation with somebody last night. They said something to me about somebody, and I said, can I actually help you not take it personal?
Yeah.
Because I know what their birth chart looks like. Right.
But here's the advantage to that I'm walking through it right now. If I had taken it personally because of the way I am, because of certain Scorpio energy that's in a specific house, if I would have taken this personally, I would have gotten my stinger out and I would have burned it to the ground.
Oh, yeah.
And then I really would have had trouble, and then somebody could look retrospectively at my chart and say, well, yes, of course this was going to happen.
Yep.
But because I understand, I have a lot of Scorpio energy in this area, I've got to pull the reins back on that. I mean, I can't tell you how reactive I've been in certain aspects of this situation in my life, where I, in the past, probably would have tapped into some of that Scorpio energy and then would have reaped the consequences of it.
Yep.
Instead, I'm going to say, this isn't personal. This is what's, going on. And this season will be up at this specific time period. So I'm just not going to take it personally. And so now I'm responding to the people involved without projecting my own ideas and stories of what's happening onto it. And I'm able to get a much better outcome out of the situation, because I was, somebody once said, or I heard once, to be forewarned is to be forearmed,
Mhm.
and to understand, okay, this is what's going on. This is why it's happening. This is not personal with them or with me. And so
Yep.
I'm just going to stay in my zen over
Yep.
here rather than becoming reactive to it.
And wherever Scorpio sits in your chart, whatever house it is, that is where you have a ton of transformative power.
Mm,
You know, it's the area of your life that can either be manipulated the most or you manipulate others. That's your choice, right?
mhm, mhm,
Or it is where you people are magnetized to you because Scorpio is a very magnetic energy, you
mhm.
know, and people always see it as dark energy and it does have a stinger, you know, hence the Scorpio. But it's got such a power behind it. Scorpio is really, I know two ladies that have heavy Scorpio placements, and I've bragged on one of them. She'll probably watch this when I did her reading, you know, and I was just like, "You are like the best Scorpio energy I've ever seen of anybody." And she had put so much work into healing all of these issues. You wouldn't know she was a Scorpio from what we know of Scorpio energy, right?
Mhm.
She is, there's nothing dark about this woman. I mean, you want to talk about just beautiful
It,
energy. So,
that's a great example, though, of the higher octave, lower octave, right? There's, or like I said, the light and sort of shadowy side.
yeah,
Any strength that anyone has can become a weakness if it's not, uh,
yeah.
if the tail is wagging the dog.
Yeah. Well,
So to
see, you've got Virgo energy. I'm a Virgo rising. So the downside of Virgo energy is Virgos can be very judgmental of people. But you want to know what the higher vibration of Virgo energy
Yes,
is?
please.
We're the healers. We're the people that are in service to other people to heal them.
Mm,
You know,
yeah,
Virgos kind of like to stay behind the scenes as well. You know, I've got this Gemini stellium, but I'm a Virgo rising, hence the struggle I've had for
yeah.
so long of all this energy pulling me out in front of people, being on TV, all the singing and everything that I've done. And yet I really just want to be the backing vocalist. I really just want to stay back here. That's Virgos very much wants to stay behind the scenes and without people knowing that they're having an impact. They're happy to stay behind closed doors and have that impact, you know?
Yeah.
So you get to see, that's what I would encourage everybody. If you don't even want to get a full chart reading or anything, just look up your chart, see where the planets sit, and learn what the higher energy is of each sign and the lower energy. What's the highest energy of your Mercury in Libra? And what's the lower energy? You know, Librans love balance, they love justice. You know,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
lower energy of Libra is they're the biggest player out there.
Really
Oh yeah, I mean Libras like to play.
interesting.
So
Interesting.
yeah.
I know someone recently just told me that they were all three of their sign, their sun sign, their rising sign, and their moon sign were all in Libra.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay, so
that's
they're
what they
pretty close.
said. Now, whether or not they had access to accurate information, I gave them your name, so hopefully
Okay.
they'll contact you.
Yeah. And you know what's important too is not just the rising sign, but even where the planets are. For example, if a lot of your planets are below the horizon line in your chart, you're probably going to be an introvert. And a lot of people, when they see that, they're like, "Oh, thank God." Here I was thinking that I feel bad because I need to be getting out more, but it's actually just the energy you were born with. All of my energy's all up here, and you don't have to be a Facebook friend with me, and you know that I'm just all out there. You know what I mean? So it's okay. I've always been like that, and it made a lot of sense to me.
Mm,
So
yeah.
yeah,
Lisa, I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful that we found each other
me too.
on Facebook. Thank you so much for doing this. I hope you'll come
Thank
back
you.
because
Absolutely.
I
Yep.
suspect this is going to be one of my more popular videos,
Oh,
and a lot of people will be interested in hearing more from you in the future.
great.
So thank
Yeah,
you for your
happy
time.
happy to come and like actually share a chart if people want to see it.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah,
That
share
would
my
be
screen
great.
and do a little, could even do like a little reading for somebody real quick just to kind of give people an example. So happy to do any of that anytime.
That would be a great follow up. Thank you for sharing your time with us. And is there anything as we're closing, anything that you haven't said that you would like to say, or any closing remarks at all?
Um, after we finish this, I'll go through the questions and just see if I can type up and just give people resources and stuff like that. I'll try to answer some of the comments. But other than that, thank you for having me. I'm excited. Astrology is actually going to really get a lot more popular because of the transits that we're going through. I'll say one more thing. The transits that we are going through this summer have not happened in 10,000 years.
Wow.
So, it feels like the Earth's on fire at the moment. It's because we are heading towards sort of a climax period. The next 4 to 5 years are going to be pretty interesting to watch because of these planetary alignments and how they're all playing out for us. So, yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
And everybody, thanks for watching. Again, just last plug for Lisa here. I would encourage you to contact her on Facebook or on her email. You'll definitely benefit from her work. So again, thanks, Lisa. Thanks everybody for watching. Sorry if we didn't get to your question or your comment. We could spend another hour or two just going through the comments. I appreciate all the comments, but we'll definitely